All right. Looks like we are live and ready to go here for tonight's Panther. What is this show called? Panther-Lair Show. It's the Panther-Lair Show. Streaming live, of course, on Tuesday night at 8:30, as we do every week on YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. That's our YouTube channel. You can tune in and join the conversation every Tuesday night from 8:30 until 9:30, or however long we need to talk about all the pressing pit topics of the day. Of course, Panther-Lair Show you can listen to throughout the week as a podcast, and we appreciate everyone who tunes in that way. Appreciate any way you choose to listen to the show or consume the product. We appreciate it. Of course, fun thing about tuning in on Tuesday nights on YouTube is you can join the conversation. We have our live chat stream going there. And you can join the chat, post your comments, post your questions, and that's kind of the fun of it is, getting in on the conversation, getting in on the action, and getting in, like I say, the discussion about Pitt, Pitt football, Pitt basketball, Pitt recruiting, anything else going on. I'm trying to set something here that I thought I had set on our live stream, but I guess I was unable to do it. Let's see here. Anyway, glad everybody could tune in here on a Tuesday night. Appreciate everybody who's there already. RJ Seaman38 jumping in already off the bat as a super chatter. We appreciate that. You want to support the podcast, you can hit that little dollar sign there at the bottom of the chat screen. Throw a couple bucks, throw a little support for the podcast. We certainly appreciate that. And everybody who chimes in, will be sure to get to your comments and questions if you choose to do that, if you choose to become a super chatter. So that's a good way to make sure your comments get read and your questions get answered. I always say that's the fun part about doing these Tuesday night podcasts is we can have a conversation. So jump in there, throw some comments and questions in the chat, and we will be sure to get to them. Of course, I have to give a shout out to Home Field Apparel. I've got the shirt on right now. You can see the Home Field shirt. Which one? I've got the gray with the old school sort of retro looking Rock Panther mascot there. I don't even know if they called him Rock back in the day. I'd have to check with some of our historians. I'll have to ask Sam Shulo if they used to call it Rock back in the day or not. But got the retro look, super soft t-shirt, super comfortable t-shirt. Homefieldapparel.com. Go check them out. I mean, their Pitt collection is awesome. They've got great stuff. They've got great designs, and it's high quality product. This is the most important thing, is that it's a high quality product that you can you can enjoy. And I always say this, that you can have great graphics, you can have great logos and great designs, and that's all cool, and there are a lot of places to make cool looking t-shirts and sweatshirts, but having high quality material that you put them on, that's going to be soft, it's going to be comfortable, it's going to keep its shape. I think that's I don't think you can put a dollar value on that. I think that's a pretty crucial thing, a pretty crucial element. And so make sure the stream is giving me strange signals right now saying that anyway, I think we're going live. We got people tuned in, got comments jumping in already. S-Mac and RJ Seaman38, our guy, already jumping into the conversation. So I know we're going good on the stream. Hopefully everything is working well out there. So homefieldapparel.com. Go to the website, check them out. We'll have some special offers with Home Field coming up in the next couple weeks, so make sure you tune into that and check in and make sure see what you like there. They've got great Pitt stuff, and they've also got great a lot of schools. They have a lot of schools, so you can go check that out. All right, let's talk a little Pitt sports. Move past our promos. Home Field, got to appreciate them though, because they do support us. So Pitt basketball, kind of where we have to start off, I think, since they're in season right now. And, fresh off, and there's a couple things to talk about with Pitt. With Pitt basketball right now, there's the most recent game in the past, and then there's also the future that is a little bit uncertain because they were supposed to play tomorrow night. That game got postponed, the game at Louisville, due to COVID issues in the Cardinals program. We'll talk about that in a second, and postpone games because they keep adding up. But on Saturday, Pitt went to Virginia, took on the Cavaliers, ranked 14th in the country, and they lost that game 73-66. Disappointing. They covered. I think they were 11-point underdogs on the road. They covered on the road and, had some encouraging, there were some encouraging signs, right? They shot 43% from the floor. They only turned the ball over 9 times. They out-rebounded Virginia. They didn't hold the Cavaliers under 40% from the floor. Virginia shot 53% in the game. But, beyond the numbers, right? So they lose by 7. And there aren't a lot of 7-point losses you're going to come out of it and say, boy, they played really well, or you felt really good about it. I mean, it's not a blowout. It's not double digits, but it's not like they were so close they were in it until the very end. That one shot could have changed the outcome. But I couldn't help but feeling, if not encouraged, I wasn't entirely discouraged by the loss of Virginia. I didn't think Pitt was going to win. Even despite what we saw against Virginia Tech earlier in the week, and I know that going on the road doesn't mean the same thing in 2020 and 2021 that it has meant in the past. It's not the same thing to go on the road. There's home court advantage has been lessened a little bit, but it's still tough to win on the road. I mean, I think there are some elements that don't change, or aren't entirely reliant on having fans in the stands. Some things that make playing on the road difficult. And it's still a challenge, particularly when you're going against a talented team like Virginia, which, I don't think there's any question. Virginia's a really good team. They've had the success that they've had. They've been one of the best teams in the ACC for the past few years. Tony Bennett has a machine going with that program. And so I expected Pitt to lose. I didn't expect them to win that game. What I was most interested in seeing is how well they sort of acquitted themselves. You know what I mean? Were they competitive with Virginia? Did they give Virginia a game? Did Virginia have to work to beat Pitt? And to that end, I think they did. I think they did. And to be honest, I really think that game, Pitt was every bit up to the task of playing with Virginia, if not outplaying Virginia, outside of like a 4-minute stretch in the second half. It got to 36-36 around the 16-minute mark or so, and it was really competitive. I think they were trailing at halftime. They were trailing 30-27 at halftime. You get 4 minutes into the second half, it's 36-36, and you're thinking, okay, this is a ball game. This is competitive. It's going down. And then it did go down, and it went down in Virginia's favor because the next 3 or 4 minutes were all Virginia. As the Cavaliers went on a 16-0 run, they hit 4 free throws, and more importantly, they hit 4 3-pointers that just really put the game out of reach. And Pitt, on the other hand, went 0-4 from the field. And every missed shot they had, Virginia grabbed the defensive rebound. Pitt really couldn't do anything. Justin Champagnie was 0 for 3 from the floor and had a foul. Xavier Johnson had, I think he missed the shot. He had a turnover and a foul. It just all went wrong for Pitt in those 3 or 4 minutes, and Virginia capitalized. And I guess this is the danger. When you play a good team like Virginia, and they have players like Huff and Hauser and these guys, you run the risk that if you're not really sharp and playing really well for 40 minutes, there might be a stretch in there where the other team is able to put you away. And that's what happened. But for the other 36 minutes or 37 minutes or so, Pitt was every bit up to the task of playing with Virginia. And that's not a, other than that, how did you like the play, Mrs. Lincoln type of thing. Pitt was equal to Virginia, or better. They lost the game by 7, and that's a 16-0 run. So for the rest of the game, they were better than Virginia by 9 points. And you can't cherry pick like that. Basketball is a game of runs. There are going to be stretches like that in every game, and that's how one team ultimately wins, is they have that stretch where they're able to stretch out their lead or take a lead and build on it a little bit, seize momentum, seize control of the game. And so that's part of it. And you can't erase that and only focus on the other 36 minutes, because Pitt has to find a way in those stretches where the other team's knocking down threes and you're missing everything you shoot. You got to get an offensive rebound. You can't let the other team get every board. And so by no means am I excusing that 4-minute stretch. And by no means am I saying we should ignore that stretch. And by no means am I saying, it didn't matter and I'm only going to think about the other part of the game. But, Pitt's not competing for a national championship right now. Right now, what we're looking for is this team steadily improving and not taking, steps back, not regressing. And they certainly regressed after the win over Duke. Right? They lost to Wake Forest. They really didn't compete all that well with North Carolina, and then the worst loss of all, 26 points to Notre Dame at home. They took steps back, and we were looking for Pitt to rebound. How are they going to bounce back? Are they ever going to bounce back? Are they going to pull themselves out of this tailspin? And they did it against Virginia Tech, and even though they didn't get the win at Virginia on Saturday, I think they continued some of that momentum in that Virginia game. They played well. Not well enough to win, but they played well. And I think well enough that you would say, all right, they're still continuing the momentum. They're still building that momentum. And I don't think they let too much of the momentum go. And I think Jeff Capel kind of said that after the game. I think some of the players sort of seemed to feel that way. Not that they were satisfied with a loss, and not that they're going to, deal in moral victories. I don't think anybody wants that. But not feeling like you took a giant step back despite losing, I think it's positive. And if that's what the players took from the game, I think they were right to do so, because I don't think they took a big step back. And I think that's encouraging. Now they were supposed to follow that up with a trip to Louisville. That game was supposed to be tomorrow night. It's supposed to be a 9 o'clock game on Wednesday night, I should say, because who knows when you're, obviously we're sitting here talking on Tuesday night, but you might be listening to the podcast later in the week. And, so saying tomorrow night might not necessarily mean the same thing. So they were supposed to play at Louisville on Wednesday night, 9 o'clock game. It was going to be on the ACC network and all that stuff. That game got postponed. Now Pitt's got 6 scheduled games left and about 4 postponed games that have yet to be rescheduled. There was the game at Duke on December 29th, has not been rescheduled. There was the game against Florida State at home on January 9th, got moved to January 10th, got moved to February 6th, and has been moved again. It got replaced by that game at Virginia on Saturday. Still up in the air on when they will play Florida State. And then they had a game at Boston College scheduled for January 23rd. That was the day they ended up playing at Wake Forest and lost that game. Blew the winning streak that they had, the 3-game winning streak. So they were supposed to play at Boston College on January 23rd. That game got postponed, has not been rescheduled, and now you've got this Louisville game. And so that's 4 games that have yet to be rescheduled, and really, unless the ACC does some crazy things with scheduling, there's really only room for like one more game. They've got a midweek slot open in the final week of February. They have a game on Sunday the 21st against Clemson, and then on Sunday the 28th, they play at NC State. And they don't have any games in between there. The ACC tends to go weekend game, midweek game, weekend game, midweek game. And right now, over the next 3 weeks of the season, Pitt is pretty much filled up. They go to Georgia Tech this Sunday. They get NC State at home as the midweek game next week. They host Clemson the following Sunday, like I said, and then the Sunday after that, they go to NC State. Then they have Wake Forest at home as the midweek game on March 2nd, and then they close the season at Clemson on March 6th. So there's really only one slot left if the ACC is going to stick with the weekend, midweek. There are some ways to work around that. You could try to get to the schools to play 3 games in a week, maybe on like a Saturday, Tuesday, Friday type of thing, Saturday, Tuesday, Thursday, Sunday type of thing. You could fit in an extra game that way. You could also extend the regular season, push back the ACC tournament, shorten the ACC tournament to get in more regular season games. Or, door number 3, the most likely option, and the one that I've been talking about for a couple months now, you just don't play a full 20 games of your conference schedule in the regular season. And that's ultimately what I think is going to happen. I've said for a while, I don't think anybody in this conference is going to play a full slate of regular season conference games. It's just there's too many moving pieces. You got 15 teams, and you're trying to juggle around these schedules, and you saw it like, last week. All of a sudden, Virginia Tech or Virginia, I forget. I think they were supposed to play Louisville on Saturday. Pitt was supposed to play Florida State. There was an opening also to get. There were a couple things going on. Initially, it looked like Pitt's game against Wake Forest, the one scheduled for March 2nd, was going to get moved back to this past Saturday, to February 6th. They ended up moving the game at Virginia, which was scheduled for later in the season. I forget, that might have been the midweek game in the week of the 21st. And they moved that back to February 6th. It's kind of what they did with the Syracuse game earlier, where they didn't. It wasn't like they were rescheduling a Syracuse game that needed to be made up. They were moving one from further on the schedule back just to get it in, so they have opportunities later in the schedule. And they've done a lot of this kind of juggling with the schedule to try and get as many games in as possible. But you're still going to end up, like I said, Pitt's got 4 games right now that have been postponed and have not been rescheduled, and they've only got one opening. I don't see how, and they're not the only ones that are like that. Florida State has had a bunch of games postponed. They can't seem to get clear of this. Louisville has had a few games in a row here postponed. You got this mess with North Carolina. I mean, what are you thinking? And it's not even. I can't even entirely criticize the players and the teams. You look at percentages. I mean, just no matter how careful you are, the odds favor some percentage of college basketball players. If not in every team, then some percentage in every conference testing positive for COVID at some point over the course of a 5-month sample, or a 4-month sample, or whatever the season is. And because of that, you're going to have games postponed. And I think it was, I probably would have said as far back as December. I probably did say as far back as December. It's unlikely all these games get played. And we're seeing that now. We're seeing that it's going to be very difficult to get in when Pitt's got at Duke, they've got at Boston College, they've got at Louisville, and they've got home against Florida State. I don't see how you get all 4 of those in. Particularly not when Florida State and Louisville are still in a mess right now. So, but this is... this is where they're at. So they've got these 6 games scheduled. At Georgia Tech, home against NC State and Clemson, at NC State, home against Wake Forest, and at Clemson. There's opportunities in there. There's opportunities when we look at Pitt being 9-5 right now. 9-6, overall, 5-5 in the ACC. There's opportunities in there out of 6 games, getting to... Geez, I don't know. What do you think? I mean, if they play 6 games, let's say they play 7 games. If you go 4-3, 5-2, you're 14-8. I mean, I think you're going to get some looks. If you go 5-2, you're 10-7, and quite frankly, if they could get to 10 wins. Even if you don't play 20 games, I mean, that's 10-10 in the ACC, I think, in a regular year is going to get you a good, hard look at the NCAA tournament. So reaching that 10-win plateau, if Pitt could manage to do so, I think would give them a real shot, particularly if they could win a game or 2 in the ACC tournament. And right now, with the way Pitt has played, you go back before the losing streak, how they played against Syracuse and Duke, obviously in the wins, how they played against Louisville, even in the loss when they didn't have Justin Champagnie and Au'Diese Toney, how they played against Miami when they won that game. If you just go within the ACC schedule and you look at, that stretch of games, those, 5 games prior to the 3-game losing streak, and then you look at what they've done in the 2 games since the losing streak, right? You've got 7 games that tell you one thing about this team, and you've got 3 games that tell you something else about the team. And right now, I'm leaning toward those 7 games telling me something about the team. You know what I mean? As opposed to the 3-game losing streak. And Jeff Capel said this after the Virginia Tech game. He said, something to the effect of, we looked like we looked for the majority of the season. And I think he's right about that. I think this team has shown enough at this point that I reasonably believe that they can compete with anyone in this conference. I reasonably believe that they might not win every game, every night out, but they can give almost every team in this conference a game. And I mean, look, in the last 2 games, they've given 2 of the top teams in the league a game. They beat one of them and, hung in there with the other outside of, again, a 3 or 4 minute stretch there. And so as you look down these final 6 or 7 games, you say, well, how many can they really win? Which Pitt team is going to show up? And that's a real question. I mean, that's a legitimate question of which Pitt team is going to show up. But if they show up and play as hard against Georgia Tech, home and home against Clemson, home and home against NC State, and when they host Wake Forest, if they show up and play as hard in those games as they did against Virginia Tech, as they did against Virginia, and then going back as they did against Duke and Syracuse twice, if they play as hard against these next 6 or 7 teams as they did against those teams, they've got a shot to win a bunch of the games and be competitive in all of them. And it's been a while since I think we could have said that. You know what I mean? I think it's been a while since we would have said, hey, Pitt can compete with anybody on their schedule. They're at a point right now, for a variety of reasons, where I think it's true. They can compete with anyone on their schedule. And if we're gonna step way back and take the big picture view, the really long view of this thing, I think that counts as progress. I think that's what you want to see. It's what you wanted to see out of this season is progress, steps forward. And if they finish out the final 6 or 7 games of the regular season the way they played the last 2, and the way they played those 5 before the 3-game losing streak, then I think you're going to look at it and say, that's progress. They got better. They were better this year than they were a year ago. They looked more ready to compete in the ACC this year than they did a year ago. Now, if they put in a bunch of dog performances, if they play like they did in the 3-game losing streak over these next 6 or 7 games, then we're going to change that opinion, because then there are questions and things haven't moved ahead, haven't moved forward as much as they need to, as much as we all wanted to see and expected to see. But I think they're capable of showing that some real steps have been taken, which seems like a good thing to me. Let's get out to some of the questions and comments here. S-Max starting off, disappointed in no replacement game for Louisville. Pitt needs more help with their resume. Yeah, I agree. It would have been nice if they could have gotten a game in this week. I haven't looked at what, Duke and Florida State and Louisville and Boston College are doing this week. I'm pretty sure that Florida State and Louisville are in a tough spot as far as playing games goes. But I don't know what Duke and Boston College's schedule, and it's not even what their schedules look like this week. It's like 3 teams removed. If you can move around other games to get these games moved, to get this game moved, to get that game moved, and open up the games this week and get opportunities for Pitt to play one of those teams on Tuesday or Wednesday, I mean, that would have been cool. But it's not obviously not going to happen. And it's it's unfortunate, because it would have been nice to get another game in. Like I say, I think they can build up a resume on wins. Even if it's not necessarily signature wins, I think they can build up a resume on wins and give themselves a chance to make the tournament. It'll be interesting to see. RJ Man 38, who jumped in as a super chatter right off the bat, says Chris Beatty is going to be hard to replace. What has Pat Narduzzi said on this front? Pat Narduzzi hasn't talked to the media since trying to think. He might have talked to us at some point. He hasn't talked to the media since Chris Beatty left. But RJ Man 38, as you probably know from reading the Panther-Lair.com message boards, they've been moving through the process, having some interviews, talking to some candidates, and we actually named a couple candidates on the Panther-Lair.com message boards. So go check that out. We threw a couple names out there, some really intriguing guys. I think with this hire, I'll say this. I'm not going to get into the names here on the podcast, but I'll say this on the hire for the wide receiver coach. You need someone who can coach. I don't think there's any question about it. You need someone who's going to help your players get better, because that's ultimately what's going to lead you to success, right? Is getting your players better. So you need someone who's a good coach. But this has to be a recruiting position too. Like, you've got to get someone who can come in and give you some advantages and some connections in key areas, whether that's Virginia, like where Chris Beatty was, or whether it's Georgia, which is an area that Pitt has been trying to tap into. You need somebody who's got connections in those kinds of places. That was the brilliance of the Chris Beatty hire, and it worked out. He gave them a foothold in the Tidewater area, the 757 area code in Virginia. Hampton, Virginia Beach, Norfolk, all that area, and he did a great job. And helped them land some really good recruits and get them involved with some guys for next year's class. He was a really good recruiter, and it's a big loss to Pitt's staff for Chris Beatty to leave and go to the NFL. And so you need to hire a wide receivers coach who's going to come in and help you in recruiting. It can't be the only thing he's good at. He needs to be a good coach too, but he's got to be an asset in recruiting. I think this is still a really good recruiting staff. Obviously, Charlie Partridge is Charlie Partridge has the reputation he has, and he has earned it because he's a stud on the recruiting trail. I think Corey Sanders is doing really good work for Pitt, both in Eastern PA and South Jersey, but also in Western PA. Corey Sanders, the safety coach, has been working a lot in the City League, the Whippeal. He's been putting in a lot of work there. He was involved with those big defensive linemen that Pitt got this year, Nakai Johnson and Elliott Donald and Dorian Ford, as well as Stephon Hall, the Central Valley safety. Corey Sanders is a really good recruiter, and he's elevating, he's climbing the ladder at Pitt in terms of being a recruiter. I think Archie Collins is pretty good too. I think Andre Powell has done good work for Pitt in the past. But you need somebody to come into the receiver spot and again, like I said, be an asset in recruiting. I think that's very important. So we'll see what Narduzzi does. I would think by the weekend we should have an idea of who the hire is going to be. And if not by the weekend, then maybe early next week we should know, or start seeing reports about who it's going to be, who Pitt is going to hire. But I think they've got a, I think it's an important hire for sure. Royce Beacom asked this question early in the podcast. What's the chances that Pitt completes the basketball schedule? The same question applies to the ACC as whole. What is the limit of the schedule, as it probably won't be done? Like I say, I don't expect Pitt to play 20 regular season conference games. I don't expect most teams in the conference to play 20 regular season conference games. I think they're going to play as many as they can, and then go into the ACC tournament and try and go from there and hope they can pull off not a bubble, but some kind of controlled environment, I guess, for the ACC tournament. And get that thing done, as best they can. And I don't know, how they're going to be able to pull it off. I don't know how they're going to do it, but that's the goal, I think, is get as many regular season games in as you can by that, end of the first week of March, and then go have the ACC tournament. Your tournament champions going. You'll get a bunch of teams into the tournament, and you just in the NCAA tournament. And you go from there. But I think they'll play as many as they can. I don't know if they have a target number they're set. Everybody's going to get like 15 games minimum, 16 games minimum. But I think you have a lot of teams that have 3-4 games outstanding that don't get played, don't get rescheduled, and don't ultimately get played. Let's see. RJ Seaman 38 talking about the Pitt Virginia game says a 23-9 run. Pitt could not come back. Yeah, I really narrowed down to 16-0. It was a 16-0 run. The game was tied at 36. Virginia went on a 16-0 run where they hit 4 3-pointers, made 4 free throws, and Pitt went 0 for 4 from the floor and didn't grab a single offensive rebound. And like 4 minutes later, 36-36 turned into 52-36. And that's it. The rest of the way, Pitt outplayed them. You know what I mean? Or I don't know if I should say outplayed them, but they outscored them. They were down by 16 at that point. They end up losing the game by 7. So they outscored Virginia by 9 over the final 12 minutes or so of the game. And they were right with them, tied at 36 after 24 minutes of the game. that little 4-minute stretch there, it killed him. And again, you can't erase that stretch from happening. You can't pretend like it didn't happen. You can't ignore it. But I also think you do give some, you have to, I think you have to give Pitt credit for how they played for the majority of that game. And they just, in that stretch, close out better, defend the three better, grab offensive rebounds. It's funny, Virginia got their threes from their big guys during that stretch. Hauser and Huff scored the threes, the 4 3-pointers in that stretch. And I was just reading, I think it was today, there's this, I'm going to butcher the name of the Twitter account, this date in Pittsburgh sports history on Twitter, and they just tweet old links to newspaper articles and screenshots of old newspaper articles from this date. And it was one from, I had to see what year it was, but it was a game against West Virginia. It was 57-53, and this was like the year after Kevin Pittsnagel had just slaughtered Pitt. Like the previous year, Pittsnagel went off for like almost 50 points, I think, in 2 games. And this game, West Virginia was rolling. I think they were a top 10 team at the time. Pitt was only top 15, only top 15. And Pitt shut Pittsnagel down. Didn't give up any. I don't think he had a point in that game, and he fouled out with about 6 minutes to go. And Pitt ended up winning 57-53, which is sort of a classic Jamie Dixon score. They always say Jamie Dixon was the best guy to play golf with because he's great at keeping it under 60. So 57-53, they beat West Virginia, and Pittsnagel doesn't score at all. And it's funny that we're talking about a game where Pitt was really done in by 3-point shooting, big men. And that was really the difference in the game, is those guys making shots during that stretch. And that was the difference. But I think you can give Pitt a lot of credit for how they played the whole game, and certainly the 36 minutes or so outside of that stretch. John K., do you think Pitt will be selected to play in the NIT? I mean, if there's an NIT, I would imagine Pitt would be a team that would get chosen. I think Pitt right now is very seriously flirting with the bubble for the NCAA tournament. And I think if you can keep yourself in that conversation, then you're going to give yourself a great chance to be invited to the NIT. Would they go to the NIT? I don't know. Is the NIT going to happen? I don't know. I don't think there's anything you can really count on at this point. So, but I would think they're playing themselves into that position. We'll see if they're there or not. Anthony Tennyson says, Pitt, as constructed, needs a rebounding 5 who can get some points and one shooter away from being a really good team. They just don't have that guy who can go get a bucket on his own. I mean, Xavier Johnson can drive. You know what I mean? He can slash. He can drive. I think Femi Odekale can drive a little bit. Justin Champagnie doesn't drive. He doesn't work off the dribble. He, catch and shoot, and also offensive rebound, put back, second chance points type of thing. That's his game. Ethiel Horton, catch and shoot. Occasionally he'll get inside the arc, but you really want him to stay out there on the perimeter and get open, run offense to get him the ball with an open shot at the basket. And that's what he does. And I think when he's playing well, he can really make an impact on the game. He just needs to be more consistent. And I don't know why it hasn't happened yet. I don't know why it's, 15 games into the season and you're still waiting for Ithiel Horton to come into it. You're still waiting for him to find that groove on a regular basis. But at those points when he does find the groove, he's really good. That can be a game changer. And as far as a rebounding 5, yeah, I mean they need a better big man. I don't think there's any question about it. They need somebody who can play under the basket, and it's hard to find. It's hard to find. Efton Reed is the one that. That's the big target in the 2021 class, 5-star guy, number 24 recruit in the country, number 3 center in the class of 2021. You want to get him. CJF asks, so what odds do you give Jeff Capel at landing Efton Reed? I mean, that's That's the big target. When you look at Pitt's recruiting for the 2021 recruiting class, it's Efton Reed and who knows what else. I mean, nothing has really emerged. Nobody has really emerged as a top target for Capel and for Pitt in this class outside of Reed. And I think he is that important. I think he's a key guy for them to get because they need to find an impact player at center, particularly after John Hughley, looks like he probably won't be back on the team. Indefinite suspension right now doesn't sound very promising for his, future at Pitt. So getting a guy like Efton Reed, an impact center prospect, is huge for this program. They need someone to do that. It's a credit to Pitt overall. It's a credit to guys like Audis Toney and Justin Champagnie that their rebounding numbers are as good as they are. But they get no offensive production out of the post, out of the center position, I should say, out of the five. They need more. I like Abdul Kareem Coulibaly. I like what he's done. I like how he's developed his game. But he's got, you could do better. You could do better. Let's see here. CJF also asks, how do you expect Jeff Capel to fill Nike Sibande's scholarship position-wise? Does John Hughley's scholarship become available as well? Yeah, if Hughley doesn't come back, then that scholarship spot is available. To fill. Sibande is going to be gone. Terrell Brown is a senior. You would assume he's not coming back. And so that leaves you with at least like 3 spots to work with. I do expect Pitt to hit the transfer market pretty heavy. Try and find transfers, whether traditional transfers or graduate transfers. I think that's going to be part of it, sort of pretty much every year. And I remember interviewing Jeff Capel a few months ago, and it was before the season even started. And I asked him about, you lost a few guys transfer wise, Trey McGowan and Ryan Murphy, and is that you've lost guys to transfer every year since you've been at Pitt? Is that just sort of what you expect on the reg? And he was like, yeah, that's part of the game now. That's what's going to happen. You're going to lose guys, and you're going to you're going to lose guys to transfers every year, and you're probably going to add a transfer or two every year. It's just part of what college basketball is. And I think it has changed recruiting in that it's a viable means of filling out your roster and bolstering your roster. And so coaches have to evaluate transfer options as much as they, in the same way they would evaluate high school prospects. And that's for football and basketball. I think you have guys dedicated to watching the transfer portal in football, or your recruiting staff, who before was just looking for new high school prospects, is now also watching the transfer portal to see what's out there. And those guys are looking at everyone who can potentially help us. And it's part of it now. And I think it even becomes part of it to the extent where you perhaps adjust your recruiting philosophy and recruiting approach to account for the possibility of adding transfers. Well, we need this and we need this. Well, we'll be able to get one of those through the transfer portal, and we'll get one of these from high school. We'll get a point guard from over here, and we'll get a center from there, and then we'll get another center from over there, and we'll get a forward from over here. And it's, it's part of the process now. It's part of the recruiting process. And that's not going to change. That one's not going back in the bottle, so to speak. that door has been open and it's not closing. Let's see. CJF follows up. Have you heard anything on the progress of Maxim Madison this season? Brought in as a project, played the least minutes of the freshman. Does he break into the post rotation next year? I think that's a long ways away on him. I think you're right. I think he came in as a project, and I think he still is a project. You don't see him getting many minutes, despite the fact that they need someone to play in the post. They need someone to play at the center position. There have been games when Coulibaly and Brown have both gotten in foul trouble, and you still haven't seen much of Maxim Madison. He's a project, and it's going to take some time to work on him, and we'll see what the coaches are able to do with him. I don't really know. I don't know what to expect there. And I think anything you get out of him is going to be a positive because, like I say, the expectations are kind of up in the air. Scott Lynch says, what should be the expectation for William Jeffress for the rest of the season? Pretty sure he did not get any minutes against Virginia, yeah, I mean, the rotation was pretty short against Virginia. They only played 7 guys, and that's with Terrell Brown playing 3 minutes. So you've got 6 guys, Champagnie, Koulibaly, Horton, Johnson, Tony, and Aldecalé, playing 20 minutes each. And that's really, Odekale is the only one who played less than 30. The other guys all played 36, 31, 34, 35, 37. I mean, they shortened up the rotation a lot in that game. Nike Sibande didn't play. William Jeffers didn't play. Noah Collier didn't play. Maxim Madison didn't play. Gerald Drumgold didn't play. That's, I think that's a product of a tough game, a challenging game, and going with the guys who are playing the best, going with the guys who give you the best chance to win. And there was actually a question, Berg B on the message board asked this question, said, in basketball, he's curious about the strategy of getting the bench depth more experience for future success versus maximizing the chances of winning games now. And I think in that question, when you're in ACC play and you're sitting at, going into that Virginia game, you were 5-4 in the conference. Right now, you're 5-5. The goal is winning games. It's all about winning games because every win you get is going to move you a step closer to making the NCAA tournament. And making the tournament, I think, is huge for this program right now. Even in a COVID year, even in a weird year where everything's different and nobody knows what's real and all this stuff, getting into the tournament, getting back into the tournament, sort of breaking that seal again and making it a regular occurrence is so important. I really think so. I think it's crucial for this program to do that. And so every win is absolutely important. And if that means you shorten your bench to only 7 guys, really only 6 guys, plus somebody playing 3 minutes, if that's what you have to do, then that's what you do. And you're not going to be able to do that every night. They only had 11 fouls in that game. Audice Tony had 4. Koulibaly and Horton had 2 each. Everybody else had 1. And so, I mean, they were in a unique position where they didn't need to go to the bench as much because they didn't have guys in foul trouble. You're not going to have that case. It's not going to be the case every night. Every game, you're going to have games where you're in foul trouble. You're going to have to spread around a little bit more. You're going to have to use the bench more than you did against Virginia. But in that game, if you didn't have to take Champagnie off the court, you don't take him off the court. If you didn't have to take Audice Tony or Xavier Johnson or Horton off the court, you don't take them off the court. You put in Odekale because he can help, not because you have to. And if you have, and guys like Jeffress or, Collier or Drumgool or Sibande, if you have to play them, you play them. If they can help you, you play them. If you don't feel like they can help you and you don't have to play them, then you don't play them. I don't think you spend time wondering about next year. Hey, if I get this guy 3.5 minutes at Virginia, how's that going to help me? Is that going to put me over the top against Louisville next season? No. You play to win right now. I'm not trying to channel my inner Herm Edwards here, but you play to win right now. You have to. And if that means you shorten your bench like that, then you shorten your bench because you're trying to go for wins. So the expectations for William Jeffers the rest of the season, I don't know. It depends on what he shows in practice. I think he's got a lot of potential. I think he can be really good. I think he can, be a star for this team and score a lot of points and play really well. I think he's very young. I think he's got a lot of growth, a lot of growing to do physically, and in maturing and all those kinds of things. He's got a lot of potential. But right now, they need the guys who are going to help them win right now. And I don't know if he's one who can, do it right now. Kind of on the same lines, Kevin Plaucha says, did Nike Sibande transfer for nothing? Haven't gotten as much use or minutes out of him as I'd hoped. And, I think, I thought, for as much of a big deal was made about Nike Sibande transferring to Pitt, and then as much of a big deal was made about getting him eligible to play right now, I expected more. I thought he would provide a little bit more. I do think he probably is getting nudged out by how well Femi Odekale is playing. I think if Odekale hadn't been as ready to go and hadn't been, stepped up and played at a high level like he has as a freshman, you probably would see more Nike Sibande. But right now, I think they're really comfortable with Odekale. I think they're comfortable putting him out there in place of Xavier Johnson. I think they're comfortable putting him out there playing next to Xavier Johnson. We've seen some 3-guard sets when they have Odekale and Johnson and Horton together, and I think they're comfortable with it. And understandably so. I think he's played well. And if he hadn't played as well as he has, I think you might see more Nike Sibande and less Femi Odekale. But it's probably down to one of those two. Because, look, you're not taking Adise Toney or Justin Champagny out. And unless you're going to have one of those guys play the 5, you've only got room for 2 guards, right? So you've got Xavier Johnson, you've got Ethiel Horton. Those are your 2 main guys. How many minutes are you shaving off of those guys to get time for more guards? And this probably applies to some degree to William Jeffress as well. Unless you want to go 3 guards, in which case you're taking Toney off the court or Champagny off the court, or one of those guys is playing the 5. You don't have a lot of space to get more guys in. And right now, Odekale is at the top of the food chain of the guards after Johnson and Horton. And so he's the one getting the minutes. And like I said, I think it's understandable. I mean, you watch this team for 15 games, he's their best 3rd guard. That's how it looks to me, at least. That's how he's played. Let's see here. RJC Man 38, rest in peace. Marty Schottenheimer had no idea he was a Pitt man. Yeah, he's one of the Marty Schottenheimer passed away on Tuesday. One of the I don't want to say unspoken, but less heralded Pitt guys. But yeah, he played at Pitt and obviously went on to a very successful NFL coaching career. A lot of years in the playoffs. I think I was looking. He made the playoffs 10 out of his first 12 years that he was a head coach in the NFL between Cleveland and Kansas City. It was pretty good. This is pretty good. He made it a few more years after that. Never got past the the AFC Championship game. Only made it to the AFC Championship game once. Never got to the Super Bowl, but had a lot of success. Won a lot of games, and and also created quite a coaching tree. I mean, you look at the guys who coached under him, from Bill Cowher, Bruce Arians. Just to name 2 who I think resonate with Pittsburgh sports fans pretty well, particularly lately. I think he's a guy who had quite a career, a very accomplished career as an NFL head coach, and one that I think Pitt should be proud to claim. I think they should. And so, yeah, rest in peace, Marty. Kevin Ploucha, do you think anyone will transfer from Pitt after the season? Yeah, that's kind of what I was saying earlier. I think probably. You could ask me that at any point over the next 5 years. Hey, do you think someone will transfer from Pitt? Or do you think Pitt will add any transfers in the offseason? And my answer will always be yes. And maybe there'll be a year where that's not the case, but I'm always going to assume that somebody's going to transfer and somebody will transfer in. And quite frankly, I'm at that point with the football program too. I mean, they've added 2 transfers, and we'll see if they decide to bring any more in, but they've added 2 transfers, and so far, I mean, they've got like 4 guys in the transfer portal leaving. 3 of them are walk-ons. The other one's Michael Smith, wide receiver, who's on scholarship, but didn't play at all this past season due to a medical exemption, I think it was what it was. So he wasn't really even on the scholarship roster. He wasn't part of the 85-man scholarship roster. So for all intents and purposes, they don't have anybody in the transfer portal leaving. They've added 2 guys as transfers, but my expectation is once you get past spring camp, once you get past the spring semester, some guys are probably going to transfer. They'll see the writing on the wall of where they stand on the depth chart and where they're at and how things stack up, what their prospects are for playing time in 2021, and they'll decide to go and look for options elsewhere. I will expect this to happen every offseason until it doesn't. I will expect there to be transfers that go out, and I will expect there will be transfers that come in. And that's for football, and that's for basketball, and probably baseball, and probably softball, and probably, take your pick. Volleyball, both soccer programs. I mean, I think this is how it's going to happen. This is what college sports is right now. There's transfers in and out every year. And so, yeah, I expect there will probably be some guys who transfer after this season, leaving the basketball program. I think there will be some guys who transfer after this spring, leaving the football program. I think it's going to happen year after year. Let's see here. Anthony Tennyson, the problem with a short bench is guys get tired. They're not going to be efficient, so you're watching guys give up easy buckets because they can't move their feet and they can't because their legs are shot. Yeah, I hear you, but like, I mean, these are Division I athletes, playing fewer games than they're used to playing, quite frankly, so they should be more rested than they usually are. They have more time off the court, in addition to all the conditioning work that I'm sure they're doing. And, I don't think that should be a problem. I don't think Virginia went on that hot streak and a 16-0 run because Pitt was tired, because Pitt for the final 10, 12 minutes of that second half played really well and outscored Virginia. So I don't believe that they got tired in that stretch. And I don't believe they're playing enough games. It's not like they're playing night after night. They're not playing week after week. I mean, they've had so many off games, nights off where games got postponed, that I'm not really concerned about them getting tired. And you're right, Tony. I mean, ultimately, you don't want to go with 7 guys every night. 6 guys plus 1 guy playing 3 minutes. You don't want to do that every game. Then you are sort of asking for trouble. But I think on the whole, you can get by. You can do it a lot. You know what I mean? You can have a lot of games, or you can have have some guys play a lot of minutes when you need to. And when you're playing at Virginia and you've got a chance to really give Virginia a game, you stick with your guys. You don't give up possessions trying to get other guys into the game because you need to rest. Get other guys into the game if they're ready. And if they're not, you don't put them in the game. I think it comes down to that. CJF says, have the fans' expectations surrounding the basketball team been unreasonable? Jeff Capel's teams have increased their win total each year. Shouldn't year 4 be the one where an NCAA appearance is realistic? I would say you should go into next season expecting them to make the NCAA tournament. Of course, personnel moves are going to be part of it. Justin Champagnie would be the big one that you circle. Is he going to be back next season? I think there's a decent chance that he comes back next season, but there's a lot to happen between now and then. Obviously, any of these other guys, Xavier Johnson, Audis Toney, could all decide that, some or all of them could decide they want to transfer somewhere else or try to the NBA or something like that. So you don't entirely know what your roster is going to look like. If most or all of this roster comes back next season, the NCAA tournament should be the expectation. Right now, they're playing themselves into a position where they've got a realistic chance at making it this year, and maybe even in the next week or 2 weeks, the NCAA tournament becomes the expectation for this year. Is that unrealistic? I don't know. I'm not sure. I think they'll get what they earn. You know what I mean? If they've earned the right to have those expectations, then those are the expectations they'll get. I want to do a talk about NFL players real quick, just because NFL season just ended on what day was that? Oh yeah, Sunday, and some pit action in there. Jordan Whitehead, 2 tackles in the game, 2 solo tackles in the game. And Jordan Whitehead, this was inspired. I did a rundown on Panther-Lair.com on Monday going through all the Pitt players who were in the NFL this season. 18 guys were on an active roster at some point this season, and then another 4 or 5 ended up, were on practice squads or got signed to future contracts, that kind of thing, in the offseason. And so I ran down those guys, just sort of did a review of how each of their seasons went and what they what they did. And I got to be honest, I mean, obviously you've got your Aaron Donald, you've got your Larry Fitzgerald, Tyler Boyd had a good season. He caught 64 passes, 748 yards, 4 touchdowns, and should be even better when Joe Burrow's healthy and playing, as a second-year player next year. But I tell you, Jordan Whitehead is quickly moving up the list of Pitt players in the pros. He obviously had a good season. He had 83 tackles this past season, 2 sacks, 10.5 tackles for loss. He had 2 interceptions and 3 forced fumbles. 2 of those 3 came in the playoffs. And he also had a fumble recovery, 2 tackles in the Super Bowl while playing with a torn labrum. Jordan Whitehead might be one of the more underrated, underappreciated players in recent Pitt history, who really was pretty exceptional. I mean, he was really outstanding during his career at Pitt. But there were a couple things I think that lessened his reputation, sort of, I guess you would say. While he was at Pitt, 2016, he ends up missing the whole, the last few games of the season after he had a really bad arm injury, broken arm in the win at Clemson. But he also, I think, had a suspension, a 1-game suspension that year. I think he got suspended for a game or a couple of games or something the next year too. So you have some off-field questions, nothing terrible, but enough to get you put on the bench for a couple of games. And so I think that lessened it a little bit. He also didn't really put up many interceptions, but part of that was a product of the position he was playing. His first 2 years, he played that boundary safety where your goal is basically to come up and stuff the run. And he was outstanding at it. He was the team's leading tackler in 2015 as a freshman. 2016, he would have been the team's leading tackler, but like I said, he had that injury at Clemson. He still finished leading the team in tackles per game. And in 2017, he moved to the field safety position, and which put him in a different spot, gave him different responsibilities and duties, playing there a little bit more center field. So he didn't put up quite the tackles that he had in 2015 and 2016. But he was still really good. It ends up being, a 4th-round draft pick, which looks like a bit of a steal for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers because Whitehead has been, he started 41 games since then, and the 4 playoff games. He started the Super Bowl. And like I say, he played through a torn labrum. Whitehead is a good player. And probably someone that when we look back on his career at Pitt, we should put a little more respect on it. I don't know if I feel like we overlooked Tyler Boyd a little bit too. To be honest with you, I think he was so good when he was at Pitt, and I feel like people don't really talk about him that much. People talk about Donald, people talk about McCoy, talk about Fitzgerald, talk about Revis. When you're talking about great Pitt, but Connor, you talk about great Pitt players of the 2000s. Obviously, Tyler Palko. Everybody talks about him. But, I feel like people are just as likely to bring up a Greg Romeus or somebody who's good, who's very good in his career at Pitt, as they are to bring up a Tyler Boyd who is exceptional during his career at Pitt, or a Jordan Whitehead who was really good during his career at Pitt. Those are 2 guys that I think they're going to have long NFL careers. Boyd has already had long NFL career. He's 5 years in the league now. Whitehead just finished his 3rd season in the NFL, and those guys are probably going to play for a long time. As long as they stay healthy and all those kinds of things. But those are guys that Pitt should definitely be trumpeting as much as they can. In addition to Brian O'Neill and let's see, K'Wan Williams, I think, although he had a weird thing with a performance-enhancing drug suspension this year that got rescinded like the next day. A weird situation. But, Pitt's got some guys in the NFL. It'll be interesting to see what Avonte Maddox does next year. And, obviously, Aaron Donald is a 3-time Defensive Player of the Year. He's pretty good. He's pretty good. Jeez, Aaron Donald. Aaron Donald is one of the youngest players in the NFL, I think. Maybe the youngest player in the NFL who could retire tomorrow and be a lock Hall of Famer. Not based on what he could do or what his career could have been, but what he's already done. 3 NFL Defensive Player of the Year awards. First team All-Pro 6 times in 7 years. 13 and a half sacks this past season. He's absurd. He's already a Hall of Famer. Like I say, he could retire tomorrow, and he would be a Hall of Famer. I don't think there's any question about it. All right, I think we covered a lot of things. Let's see here. Scrolling here to see RJCman38 says Curtis Martin is the most underappreciated of all time. Curtis Martin, the hard thing about him is his Pitt career just really wasn't anything special. I'll always remember one of the best interviews I don't want to say ever did, because it was all about the interview subject. He was outstanding. But I talked to Curtis Martin last year on our Conversation podcast. And if you haven't listened to that, you probably could find it. If you Google like Panther-Lair.com Curtis Martin, you'll probably find it. I highly recommend you go listen to it. He was outstanding, candid, honest, humble, and very, like I say, very candid about his Pitt career and how disappointing it was to him. And this was right after he had been elected to the Pitt Hall of Fame. And I told him, what was your reaction? What did you think when they told you made the Pitt Hall of Fame? And he said, quite frankly, I was surprised because I didn't think I deserved it. I mean, he was very honest about his time at Pitt. And he went on to be, and you're right, Pitt was horrible at the time, but he didn't have an exceptional career at Pitt. There's a reason Pitt hasn't retired his number and really shouldn't retire his number. His Pitt career doesn't merit it. His NFL career, he was obviously outstanding because he started working hard, and he started really taking it seriously and really started pursuing it with far more dedication than he had when he was at Pitt. But Curtis Martin's Pitt career, is nothing really to write home about. SMAC mentions Dion Lewis. Yeah, nobody really talks about him being a Pitt guy. I feel like because he's sort of flown under the radar in the NFL. Like every now and then it'll pop up like, oh, Dion Lewis scored 3 touchdowns last week. Something like that. And, but he doesn't get put on that, Panthers in the pros pedestal quite as often as some of the other guys as well. But I mean, I definitely think Tyler Boyd, Jordan Whitehead, they should be featured when Pitt brings up their current NFL guys. They should be featured just as much as your Aaron Donald and your Larry Fitzgerald, your James Conner, etc., etc. All right, we're going to wrap it up there. I appreciate everybody who tuned in to the live stream here on Tuesday night. It's a fun conversation as always. If you want to join the conversation on a Tuesday night, it's youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. That's one word, Pantherlaircom. If you're watching the live stream here on Tuesday night, make sure before you go, we appreciate when you hit the like button on the video. That's cool, but make sure you go to the YouTube channel and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's the important thing. We need the subscribers on the YouTube channel. It doesn't cost you anything, but that'll give you notifications on when we post a new video or when we go live in case we just out of nowhere decide to have a live stream. So subscribe to the Panther-Lair.com YouTube channel. Of course, check out the website, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. It's the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet, football, basketball, recruiting. You can find it all at Panther-Lair.com. And, of course, message boards, where we can have these kinds of conversations all day, every day. Panther-Lair.com. Home Field Apparel. You got to go to Home Field. HomeFieldApparel.com. Outstanding stuff. Great Pitt gear. Great college sports gear. You will love it. I recommend it. You won't be disappointed. HomeFieldApparel.com. Make sure you tune in Saturday morning, 8 a.m., the Panthers Insider Show on Sports Radio 93.7 The Fan. We'll be having more of these Pitt conversations there. And getting ready for hopefully what is another Pitt basketball game. Panthers at Georgia Tech on Saturday afternoon, Valentine's Day. So make sure you tune in for that radio show, 8 a.m. Saturday mornings, Panthers Insider Show on 93.7 The Fan. All right, thanks again to everybody for tuning in to the live stream here on Tuesday night. Thanks for tuning into the podcast later in the week if that's how you're listening. And we'll see you on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com. Till then, have a great week. We'll talk to you next week.